Hello and welcome back to the Edge of the Box podcast, a podcast by WhoScored.com. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, joined by George, Elek and Sam Tighe to look at the Manchester derby this week. We're just going to focus on that because it's such a huge game for various reasons in the Premier League picture. This show is, of course, sponsored by UltimateFan as well, so thank you to them for continuing to back the podcast. George, I'll come to you first. How are you?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Thank you for asking back. Not often I get asked myself. I'm very well, thank you. And Sam, wearing a cap for today's podcast.
Yes, my hair doesn't look good. It's best that we put the cap on, I'm afraid.
But you showered especially for this show, you said.
Did.
So.
I did. And then I didn't do my hair.
Oh, no.
That's fair enough.
Yeah. Did you wash it?
Yes.
How often do you wash your hair?
4 times a week.
Really?
Wow.
I do mine every day.
Do you?
Shampoo and conditioner. So then, because then you have to wash my hair to be able to do it again the next day. It doesn't work otherwise with the hair product.
Isn't there a thing that you're not meant to wash your hair too often?
That's right.
Well, I'm doing okay for hair and stuff at the moment. So,
I've heard what George has heard, and that's why I tried to do sort of every other, roughly.
I'm going to continue doing what I've done. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But yeah, we haven't really got time to be talking about hair regimes and whatnot. We've already had a 40-minute WhatsApp conversation about which supermarket is the best. So we better crack on with the podcast then. Of course, it is the Manchester derby this weekend, Manchester City against Manchester United. I don't know why I felt the need to say who the two teams were, because everybody knows the Manchester derby is those two teams. George, everything looked to be going okay for Manchester United. They were winning games. Not comfortably at all, but they were churning out results. I think I said on this podcast that there's absolutely no chance that this can continue because they're not playing well, and at some point those moments of magic will dry up. Fulham went to Old Trafford last weekend and those moments of magic did dry up and they lost, and they deserve to lose, probably like they had done for the games before as well. Yeah,
you've kind of answered the question for me there, Dan, so we can move on. I mean, they won. What was it, 4 games in a row? They're unbeaten in 5. But realistically, apart from a very good first half display against Wolves, and again, they won 4-3 with that amazing Mainu goal late on. They beat West Ham 3-0 in one of the least convincing 3-0 wins I think we've probably seen in Premier League history. They were then completely outplayed by Aston Villa at Villa Park and won 2-1. They were then, having gone ahead very early, turned 2-0 up through 2 Hojlund goals against Luton, were then outplayed at 2-1 up against Luton for the majority of that game. So, yeah, the results were good, but the performances themselves, the bigger picture, dare I say it, didn't ever look particularly promising for Manchester United, and therefore it wasn't really a massive surprise to see them put in another subpar performance, but not be able to get over the line when being beaten 2-1 by Fulham in a game where United created a fair few chances in the game. It wasn't like Fulham were much the better team. I'd probably argue that Aston Villa in particular put in a more dominant display over United than Fulham did, but Fulham were able to get over the line and win the game after a good performance. So I don't think loads changed with United. It was just a case where Hojlund scored goals, which was important, and him coming out of the side, as we'll talk about, impacted them. But it wasn't like there was suddenly a massive improvement at performance level that yielded results. It was just them getting probably a little bit fortunate over a short run of games.
Yeah, so just to jump in here as well, like I did do a piece for the WhoScored website on how this did feel a bit unsustainable. And I looked at the shots conceded specifically because like the amount of shots that Man United are conceding is genuinely quite scary. And I think off the back of the Fulham game, they hit 100 shots conceded over the course of a 4 or 5 game span, which is like absolutely horrific, right? It's just awful. And individually in the games that George has talked about here, they conceded sort of 22 or 23 shots a game against Luton, West Ham and Villa. Now, Sheffield United concede an average of 17.5 shots per game. And this is a Sheffield United team who have conceded a record 65 goals after 25 games, which at the time it was written. Like, this is absolutely shocking. It's so bad. And we were watching
How are
them
they
play.
where they are in the league?
I don't know. They are
rubbish.
But you're watching these games and like you're just like this cannot continue because they play games on a very fine line, right? It's like a high wire circus act. It's because they cannot control the game at all. They cannot control the tempo. They cannot control the play. They just attack and it comes back. Attack and it comes back. And when they lose the ball, they are so vulnerable. And of course, usually in football, the team with the better players does win. And so often United have the better players on the pitch and they come out the right side of the margins, but it cannot continue forever. It's not one of those sustainable things. And eventually it was going to come up. And last week I was gutted that my prediction of 2-2, Man United 2, Fulham 2 didn't come in. And the only reason it didn't come in is because Fulham won it. I knew it was going to come off at some point.
Yeah, I mean, from what I saw, I didn't watch the whole game, but the highlights kind of showed me that, especially in the first half, Fulham were far and away the better team. I've got this theory about Manchester United where they always look at their best when they're behind, and I think that creates a false narrative around Manchester United. Oh, they're attacking, they're having a go of balls into the box, but what they're actually doing in that game, there's no sustainable build-up play there. I still don't know what they're doing going forward. I mentioned some of the teams they've played, like Wolves and Luton, for example, who are below them in the table. They've still got more identity than Manchester United, and Villa, the other game as well, have absolutely got more identity to Manchester United. I cannot believe they are where they are in the league. And I don't know whether you saw it yesterday, George, the press conference with Ten Hag, look talking before the FA Cup game. It's like on another planet. I said on another show that I do. Sometimes I'll start saying something on shows like this or on the radio, and I actually don't. When I open my mouth, I actually don't know where I'm going with what I'm saying.
All right, Michael Scott.
That's an amazing thing to admit.
No, but it's exactly the same. Erik Ten Hag's press conference it felt exactly like that. I didn't say I do it all the time. I said sometimes. I've been known to do.
Is this one of those occasions?
Yeah, no, I know what I'm doing here. Erik Ten Hag. Some of the stuff he was saying about Anthony. Some of the stuff he was saying about Jamie Carragher, some of the way he was talking about how his team play. He's just literally making it up and talking rubbish.
But this is exactly what we were told was going to happen by the media in the Netherlands when he came over. We were told that his relationship with the press was very, very awkward, that he was someone who didn't necessarily play the game particularly well in terms of cultivating relationships with journalists. And that he was always very spiky when things weren't going well. And this is what we're seeing now. His reaction to what was like a really insightful, data-led bit of insight from Carragher on Sky Sports, he seemed to take as if it was like a personal vendetta and attack on him. Like it's weird. It's weird. And, I kind of made a bit of a dig a second ago by, him saying the big picture, if you can see it, is positive. Like that's him basically saying, in my mind, reading between the lines, he's saying, you don't understand football. I understand football. I can see the big picture. I can tell you that it's going well. And there's no evidence to that.
I mean, he might just be talking about Ineos and the impending takeover. Or he might just be doing what managers do, which is they just say stuff. It doesn't have to be true. Like they don't have to speak the truth in these press conferences. And sometimes managers just talk. And they just say stuff that may not be true, but they want it to be true. And they'll just tell you it and tell you it and tell you it until actually one of these days you might believe it. And I think that is what he does sometimes, because a lot of managers do that, head in the sand stuff.
It was a bit like Rio Ferdinand saying that Arteta would definitely go to Manchester United if they came into him. I feel like you're just saying stuff for the sake of it. The clickbait. There's nothing Ten Hag said was true, and the way he spoke about Anthony, Sam. If that stuff was true, then he wouldn't be going through the under-21s, under-19s, under-18s, under-17s, so trying to find a right winger to play instead of him.
So what did he say about Anthony?
He said that over 10 yards, there's no player quicker. I'm not sure. I'm not sure over the first 10 yards. Sorry,
yeah,
I'm not sure I've seen that. He's just saying about his mentality. He's excellent. He's not in the team at the moment, basically, but he's going to come back. And I know what a good player is. What a good player he is. I haven't really seen any evidence of that. And pound for pound, I think now you could realistically say he's up there as arguably the worst Premier League signing ever.
Yeah, it's going to be tough.
Lukaku second time round.
I mean, it's going to be tough to beat Anthony here in these stakes, isn't it? Because he was a lot of money, right? He was like 80 or 90 million, wasn't
86 million, I believe.
I mean, yeah, and I think we all said it at the time, what the hell are you doing? Like, just what are you doing? And it was a symbol of how poorly the club was run, obviously, that they got to the end of the window and they didn't have a winger and they were like, crap, we need a winger. But they don't really have a front office or a scouting department either. So they said, Eric, anyone you've worked with, mate? Fancy? And he's like, oh, yeah, the guy at my last... I used to live in Amsterdam and there was a good winger there, Anthony. All right, cool, yeah. Let's pay whatever. That was it. That is how it felt. So Yeah, not great. Not Anthony's fault, obviously. Something I feel like I've said a lot this week, or people are saying a lot. When you talk about the Chelsea signings, Moises Caicedo did not ask to be made £120 million player, and neither did Enzo.
No.
And it's tough on these players when they're clearly, in Anthony's case, clearly nowhere near worth this much money. And he is quick over 10 yards. I'll give him that.
The first 10 yards.
Yeah.
Obviously, he didn't even say over 10 yards. He said over the first 10 yards and almost implied. And after that, he runs out of steam.
I mean,
it was almost implied like that.
And there is a difference between quickness and speed, right? But is like top, yeah. Well, so quickness is that sort of short area quickness. It's being agile. Burst. It's burst, right. And then speed is like once you're running for more than 30 meters. Are you fast? Like
I think sometimes Sam opens his mouth and even he doesn't know where he's going when he says something.
Bale was fast, right?
Okay.
Raheem Sterling is quick. That's my distinction between the two. One's really, really quick and agile over short areas. Bale, if you just get him going over 60, 70 meters, he'll just rinse you. Ten Hag's not necessarily wrong about calling Anthony quick or whatever over a short distance. But yeah, I mean, it's very disappointing to see a winger costing 86 million that can't sprint properly. That's not good.
And one signing that was looking like it was starting to go quite well, George, was of course Rasmus Hojlund. Had just hit a little bit of form, and then as luck would have it, he ends up getting injured off the back of that good form. Over the last 6 appearances, he's actually second in the Premier League form rankings according to WhoScored. Saka is top with 8.38, Hojlund second with 7.95, and Pascal Gross is 7.94 in third. After that, there's Barkley, Ødegaard, Declan Rice, Rodri, McAllister, Watkins, and Luis Diaz. Rashford, obviously, I said they didn't play him. They didn't play him because he was injured. Rashford ended up playing up front, George. It never works. It never goes well. But they've got. I suppose they've left themselves in a position where who else can they play there?
I just never understand why there is this perception that Marcus Rashford can play up front. Like I don't get it. Is it because he scored like 4 goals when he was a teenager when he was dropped in there, and people still have that memory of him scoring kind of strikers finishes? Like, this is a player whose best, like most impactful moments on a football pitch is when he picks up the ball from wide areas. Like, why would you play that player through the middle? I don't understand. He doesn't score the kind of goals that you want a goal scorer to score. He doesn't hold the ball up well. He doesn't link play particularly well. He's someone who needs to get on the ball facing goal and standing players up and using his pace. And you just don't do that through the middle. I genuinely think I'd rather have like Bruno playing up front than
McTominay.
Rashford. Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't understand this idea that he's a striker. It doesn't make any sense. We see it with England the whole time.
Harry Maguire.
Why not? Fine. But like, when people talk about the England squad, it's like, oh, we'll only take probably Kane and Watkins because Rashford can be the third striker if needed. Why?
No, it's fair.
No. Like, what is this? I don't understand why.
The better option there is take Bowen as the third striker, winger / striker.
Yeah, or just bring Tony and just anyway, it annoys me. Like, I don't understand. There's just very little evidence to suggest that he is effective through the middle. And if United, I think the downgrade of having Rashford there rather than Hojlund, but also taking away a very, I know he's not having a good season and he's not in a particularly good place right now, but taking away the attacking threat of Rashford from the left-hand side on top of that, it just makes United so much weaker.
I think people say it about England because they know that's what Southgate will do, because that's what's been done in the last couple of squads, isn't it? He has gone as the left winger, but if anything was to happen to the first 2 strikers, he's the next cab off the rank, I guess. I don't agree with it, but I say it because I think that's what happens. Right.
I'm pretty sure that's what they do. Not that we've ever got to that point, by the way.
No, and we probably won't again. No, and we won't do it again, will we? Yeah. I mean, there's talk of Casemiro's going to go in the summer. Last season, he was excellent.
Stick him up front.
He's not gone quite as well. I mean, literally anyone. Anana, get him up front. Get him up front over Rashford. But anyway, yeah. So it looks like they're going to be looking for a new central midfielder in the summer. I mean, they've got problems, it feels, in a lot of positions. Obviously, they wanted Frankie de Jong. They chased him for a whole summer. Is that still the type of profile of player that they need, or do they need a younger Casemiro?
All the Man United fans want Erik Ten Hag to basically implement the Ajax possession style of play. And I think there was a fair expectation that he would do that, having come from Ajax. He has recently said, can't do it, right? He's come out and said, can't do that. Sorry, not an option. I have to use the players at my disposal. I've got to look at the personalities of the players. Fine. That's what good management is, right? Get the best out of your players. He says he has to tap into that Man United DNA. And you go ahead and you look at the team. You've got Rashford, you've got Bruno Fernandes, all these guys. Okay, do you actually want them to be stringing passes together? Or are these players at their best when they're playing, direct football, off-the-cuff football? There is an argument to suggest that is probably the right way of doing it. However, the transfer window exists, and that is your opportunity to go out and buy players and then mould in a new philosophy.
And he's done that. He has done that.
Yes.
He's had 3 windows.
Yes, he's had 3 windows. Yeah.
This is what I don't understand.
Still hasn't really made that move, hasn't migrated towards that controlling style. And presumably he wanted Frankie because he knows that this Man United team cannot control periods of possession and control periods of the game, right? They can't manage the tempo and manage the ball. So presumably he wanted Frankie to come in and do that. That failed. So then Eriksen sort of did that for a bit. And then Eriksen, unfortunately, has dipped off a bit. Mainu now does it to the best of his ability, but everyone else around him can't do it, so it doesn't really go very far. What I'm trying to say is I don't know what they need to do because I don't know where Ten Hag's head is at.
Do you think he'll be there? Do you think he'll be the manager next season? If they don't qualify for Champions League, which is a real possibility. We know that 5th might end up being a Champions League place, but there is a real possibility that Manchester United won't get top 4, top 5 this season.
I don't think he'll be there for long, personally.
No.
I think the new era, I think there's a certain amount of toxicity at the club now that I think Ten Hag's attitude and the way that he has in the media plays into a little bit. I think if Manchester United and the new ownership group or the new controlling group want to actually welcome in a new dawn at United, I think quite an easy way of doing that from a PR point of view is to go and hire a shiny new smiley manager and end this era.
Yeah, I don't know who that next man would be. I guess a good idea would be to go and contact Ruben Amorim at Sporting and see if he fancies it, that sort of thing. If you look at that kind of potential move and you think, well, yeah, I think there's an upgrade there to be done. But then there is obviously the new ownership element that George alludes to as well. Will Ineos just want to lay down a clean slate after what's happened this season? And some of it is mitigated by injuries. I do appreciate that. But after what's happened this season, the total lack of personality to the team, it's tough. It's tough. It can get tough to defend his position at times. And if they end up 11 points off Villa or 15 points off Villa, you can't report that in a good way, no matter how you slice it.
Well, you would expect Manchester United to lose this game with all due respect, well, actually no respect at all, to Manchester City this weekend. And then if Villa beat Luton, Villa would only need 5 wins from 11 to make it to 70 or 71 points. Manchester United would then need to win 9 from 11 to beat that. And that isn't something that you think would happen.
It doesn't seem like they can win 9 out of 11 games, does it?
No,
it doesn't look like a team that can do that. They are very streaky and they might win 5 in a row, but the thing is that they will then lose 4 in a row. So that's the problem.
I think goal difference is a massive problem as well. That would essentially mean they'd need an extra point even on top of that. So maybe they'd need 10 wins from 11 actually to usurp Villa if Villa can just get this win at the weekend. I mean, that's not a great state for Manchester United to be in. And I take the point about, okay, he may not be able to play the Ajax way, George. But why can't he have a hybrid of that? Why can't I see that they're good at other things or trying to play in another way? They're not really a great counter-attacking side. I don't think there's that thumb again. I don't think they're a great counter-attacking side. They don't defend brilliantly. Their passing isn't great. They're not great pressers. Why isn't there? Why can't I look at any of those things and say they're good at that? Because he has had 3 windows. Why can Unai Emery come in and create something and create an ethos in the time he's been there less time? Why can Postecoglou do it? Why can Gary O'Neill do it? Why do I know what those teams are, but I don't know what Manchester United are?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'd love to know from Ten Hag's point of view, what his ideal kind of plan is. Because even though, there are players in the United squad, Rashford certainly being one of them, who are suited by attacking in transition. And we saw that to great effect last season. I think when you've got a really physical striker like Hojlund, you want him to be playing, further up the pitch. You don't necessarily want him to be leading the line, but playing in a low block in a deeper role. And then when you factor in, whether it's Eriksen playing, who's someone who obviously wants to play in a team that dominate the ball, Casemiro, a player who obviously, the best periods of his career of playing playing kind of shielding a high line in a 4-3-3 in a possession-based team, something he's never really done at United. At United, Casemiro has been the player that all possessions kind of gone through, which hasn't really suited him. It just feels like they don't really have the players necessary to implement a really heavy possession style of play. Like, I think if they tried to do that, they wouldn't be able to look after the ball well enough in advanced areas to do it. And then, as we mentioned, they don't necessarily have the counter-attacking threat that's needed to play that way effectively. It feels to me like they're a classic team at the moment where when they're behind in games, they dominate the ball. When they're ahead in games, they allow the opposition to have possession. It's a mixed style based on game state. And there aren't really very many ultimately successful teams who do that. Atleti are clearly one under Simeone who've consistently done that over the last decade. But that's a one-off. If you look at the teams that are generally the most successful, there is a philosophy. Successful at the top level, there's a philosophy that they're wedded to.
Yeah, I feel like he's kind of making things up on the fly as well. Like Ineos have come in, and there's obviously going to be that focus on youth now. Suddenly he's chucking a few younger players in there to show, I'm on the same page as these guys. I can be the right man. I don't remember him doing that earlier on in the season. So yeah, I do feel like Ten Hag.
He's put Kobe Mainu in and played him. Yeah, well, now he's
recent. That's a recent thing, though, isn't it? Since the Ineos stuff has been going through and getting ratified, and they've come out and spoken a little bit about what they plan Manchester United to be. I feel like he's suddenly starting to just chuck in a few little things that they might like that. They might think that I'm on the same page as them. I could be being harsh.
I do think so. I think there was a plan to have Mainu much more involved from pre-season, but he did get injured in defence of Ten Hag and Man United there, and that would have disrupted things. We can't possibly say how much he would have featured in August, September, and October.
No, that's fair. But like Forsum played at the weekend. Diallo came on. Anthony didn't, and then he says what he says about Anthony in the press conference. It's just not all aligned, is it? It doesn't all make sense. Anyway, we've character assassinated Ten Hag and Manchester United enough here. There is another team playing in this game. That team is Manchester City, Sam. Erling Haaland was quite good in the FA Cup the other night, wasn't there?
Oh, wow. Yeah, not bad, huh? So Erling Haaland missed the first Premier League game that Man City played against Luton because he was injured. And it looked like he really took that to heart because he maybe had been really looking forward to scoring against Luton and saw his opportunity here in the FA Cup, because this was a monstrous display. I mean, I'm going to caveat it here and say that Tim Krul was a disaster.
In goal. The last goal. Oh, dear.
I mean, there's problems everywhere, but yeah, the last one where Haaland drills it straight into his body and it just bounces off the inside of his leg.
It's harder to let that in than save it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and so like obviously I'm not trying to take away from scoring this many goals because it was remarkable. It was 5, wasn't it? Yeah. But Tim Krul was a disaster in this one. Even still, some lovely stuff from Haaland. The first finish is really cool, and De Bruyne. The first finish is really cool. Blindside movement off the defender's shoulder for the first goal is brilliant. Defender is pretty sure he knows where he is, and then bang, nope, you got that wrong, and he sort of stabs it in really weirdly, doesn't he? Lovely stuff. The De Bruyne through ball for I think the second one, the 1-on-1 was really, really good as well. So lovely connection. The City fans, it's just what you want to see, isn't it? Kevin De Bruyne and Erling Haaland taking advantage of what I would describe as a poorly organised defence. The offside trap was useless. All defenders at different levels, 1 or 2 yards in advance or behind one another. Gaps everywhere. Very un-Luton.
Yeah.
Like, not what I associate with Luton whatsoever. It was really strange. But I tell you what, Man United's defensive line doesn't look that solid either at the moment. So if there's space to be found, Erling Haaland is going to find it. And if there's a ball to be played, Kevin De Bruyne is going to play it.
Yeah, but he's rubbish overall, isn't he, George? Because he's had a couple of opportunities to get that in-game second hat trick now, and he's not done it. So he can never get to 6 in a game, can he? He never gets there.
Did he score 9 once?
He's got 9.
He scored 9 for Norway's under 21s, maybe.
We can't count.
It's 20 senior hat tricks now, isn't it? Which is just absolutely insane. I mean, he's brilliant. In fairness to Luton, because I kind of agree with what Sam said, but it does feel like in cup games, when you go behind early, you're going to have to, maybe be a bit more aggressive than you would be in a league game. And when you're playing against Manchester City, you're playing against a City team with De Bruyne and Haaland in the form that they're in, it's quite easy to get picked off. I thought they did pretty well. I think from an attacking standpoint, despite the fact they conceded 6, Luton created way more than we normally see teams create against Manchester City. So I wouldn't be too. If I was Rob Edwards, I think there were plenty of positives in that game to take out of it. But for City, they were totally rampant, and it was actually a couple of cruel saves late on that stopped it being 7 or 8.
Yeah. Haaland, by the way, scored 9 goals in a 12-0 win for Norway's under-20s against Honduras in the FIFA Under-20 World Cup.
You can count it. I'm not going to.
You're not having it?
No, I'm not going to count that. I want to see him score 6 in a game. He's had a couple of opportunities to do it now, and he's not done it. Until he does that, for me, he's not going to be at the elite level. And everyone says that he's at Erling Haaland. Let's talk about Matheus Nunes, George. I think I'm right in saying at the start of the season, he played a game wide for Wolves against Manchester United and looked very, very dangerous in transition in that game. Had a really effective game that night, and Wolves did play well. That night, Manchester United were lucky to win as well. Suddenly, he's been playing wide for Manchester City after you wouldn't really say he's settled up until that point. Do you think he'll stay in the team, and do you like him in that wide role?
I mean, whether he stays in the team, it's probably helped by the fact that Jack Grealish keeps getting injured. Yeah, and it does feel like City at the moment, when they play someone like Nunes rather than a Doku as a wide player, it gives them a little bit more control in games. Like I think Doku as an individual has been incredibly impressive, but right now, I think City can just win games by giving the ball to Kevin De Bruyne in dangerous areas consistently and letting him do his thing. And by doing that, you basically want to control possession as much as possible. And having players like Nunes can help with that. Yeah, you're right. I mean, first game of the season, talking of fortunate United victories, there hasn't been one more fortunate all season than that 1-0 win they had over Wolves, where I think Nunes' performance was probably all that City needed to see in order to trigger the fee to get him in that day, because he was sensational. But he's played through the middle for the most part so far, both kind of alongside Rodri and that with Jordan Roll, but also as a 10. And he's someone who's, I think, as is the way with Pep Guardiola, when he plays players in multiple positions, it's a means of getting them, kind of getting them to grips with what he demands from players in certain roles. And I'm pretty sure next season will be the season where we see Matheus Nunes really step up in a Man City shirt.
He has played a fair chunk of football from the left, but not as a winger.
Just because you're on the left doesn't mean actually you're a winger, yeah.
But lots of last season, Wolves played basically like with a flat 4 in midfield, and they did use Ruben Neves with Mario Lemina or João Moutinho, and Nunes was like kind of off the left, was just kind of there, like not really left, but kind of on the left. So not that unfamiliar to him, but just someone who can't get off the ball, right? Like he's so press resistant, so it's naturally going to be very attractive to Pep Guardiola, who just loves to control the game, control the ball. If they don't have it, they can't score, that sort of thing. So it's also not that atypical for a new signing to take their time to settle in at City. I think we've all been kind of hoodwinked a little bit by Doku, who's just like entered the team and has just flown. But like almost everybody else they ever sign like needs 6 months, maybe a year. Grealish needed a year. Rodri had a pretty tricky start to life at Man City. So just because they don't play too much in that first, a lot of them. So first 6 months, that does. I never really get bothered by that. You tend to see the better of them a little bit later than at most clubs. So hopefully for Matheus, it's just onwards and upwards, because he is lovely, isn't he? He's a great player. Yeah.
I will save it for another show, but I've actually got a few concerns about Doku. I actually think they're better with Grealish in the team. I think he takes too long on the ball, takes too long to deliver, and sometimes when Haaland doesn't score, I think it's because Doku doesn't play the ball quick enough. But that's a story for another podcast. Anyway, let's do the combined 11. Let's all have a laugh then at the combined 11, because to channel my inner Jonathan Wilson, we know it would be 11 Manchester City players, but that's not how we're going to do things. And I'm also going to channel my inner Jesse from Breaking Bad here, because he cannot keep getting away with this. How is Onana the number 1? What's going on? Onana is in this team, and then to be fair, there's 2 Manchester United defenders, and then that is it. So actually, this 11 has changed whilst we've been recording. Live breaking news here. Apparently, Bruno and Maguire are injured out, so we're not going to have either of them in the combined 11. And actually, they were both in there. So we now actually don't far off have the Manchester City 11, bar the goalkeeper, and Dalot is a left back in this team. So we've got Onana, Walker, Diaz, Akanji, and Dalot, Foden, Rodri, De Bruyne, and Doku, and then it's Haaland and Alvarez up front. I mean, I actually think Dalot is a good player. Might get the odd game here and there for City, but what's Ederson done to deserve this, Sam?
don't know. I mean, I guess
I'm being harsh.
No,
but
I'm trying to think about this from the algorithm's perspective. You know,
lots of shots against him, I assume.
Yeah, it's exposure, isn't it?
Yeah.
That ultimately, so Ederson doesn't keep a ton of clean sheets. It's not an awful amount of clean sheets, but it's not a ridiculous amount, is it? I think Pickford's got the most in the league, rather than Manchester City's goalkeeper, which always feels a bit weird, but it is.
No, I didn't know that.
It is one of those things. So, if Ederson's not keeping a clean sheet to boost his score on the algorithm, what is he doing? What's he being forced to do? And the reality is that if Onana is facing 22 to 23 shots a game, Dan, he's busier. He's making those saves. He's getting those points. So that's what has happened here, I think.
Yeah, the algorithm knows what it's doing. Let's get our predictions in then. Manchester City against Manchester United. Just before we do these predictions, we all got 5 points last week, which has left the league table unmoved. Well, it hasn't unmoved because we've all got 5 extra points, but the same distance between us as there was previously. I'm on 159. Sam and Jonathan are on 147. And then George, sometimes Ali, are on 100. Is on 129. Right then, predictions for this one, George.
3-0 City.
3-0 to City, Sam.
3-1 to City.
3-1 to City, and you're going to like this prediction here. 5-2.
Manchester
City. I think if you get that right, you deserve like a couple of extra points.
Yeah, thank you. Well,
don't say that.
We'll speak to them. Man City do concede, and something does feel like they could quite easily go 5-0 up and then to go into second gear. Manchester United score.
It's almost like you watched them win 6-2 last night.
Well, he played into the prediction. No, that's not illegal to do that, George. I'm allowed to watch games and then make my prediction based on what I see happen on the pitch.
I was saying that's the reason for it not being a good one, but it's good. I wasn't saying
I don't know how you do it, but that's generally how I make my predictions. Let's do the rest of our predictions, and I haven't got any more 5-2s. You'll be pleased to hear. So Brentford against Chelsea, Sam.
1-1.
Yep, exactly the same for me. 1-1, George.
2-1 Chelsea.
2-1 to Chelsea. Everton against West Ham. I've gone for 2-0 to Everton. George?
1-1.
1-1. Sam?
I've got a Desmond. 2-2.
2-2. Nice. I've got a 2-2 for Fulham against Brighton. Sam?
I've got 2-1 to Fulham.
2-1 to Fulham. George?
2-2. Annoying me.
2-2. I've got another 2-2 here. Newcastle Wolves is down as a 2-2 here. George?
2-2.
2-2 as well. Sam?
I've got 1-1.
1-1. There's going to be absolutely no 2-2s this weekend, and about 7 5-2s now based on these predictions. Forest against Liverpool, Sam.
3-1 to Liverpool.
Yep, 3-1 to Liverpool here as well. George?
3-0.
3-0 to Liverpool. Yeah. Spurs against Palace. I was really close to going for a draw for this one, but I've gone for 2-1 to Spurs. George?
2-0 Spurs.
2-0 Spurs. Sam?
3-1 to Spurs.
3-1 Spurs. Didn't feel worth the risk to go for a draw when I knew that you two would go for Spurs wins. Luton against Villa, the big one this weekend, Sam?
2-1 to Villa.
2-1. God, exactly the same for me. 2-1 to Villa. George?
2-2.
2-2. Another 2-2 in there. Sam's
that's wrong.
That. Yeah, it's wrong. I hope it's wrong.
No.
I hope it's wrong. Wins only here. Wins only. Villa need. Burnley against Bournemouth. George?
2-1 Burnley.
Well, that's interesting. I've gone for 2-0 Bournemouth. Sam?
I've gone for 3-1 to Bournemouth, which is my fourth 3-1
like me
of the week.
Like me with the 2-2s. Man City v Manchester United, we already done, and we know we'll be 5-2 to Manchester City. And then to finish, Sheffield United against Arsenal, Sam.
This is one of those correct scorecards. It's like when England plays San Marino and you place a bet. You've got to pick between 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8-0. I'm kidding. I'm not going that high. I'm going to go for 3-0 to Arsenal, though.
I've gone for 3-1 to Arsenal. George?
5-0 Arsenal.
5-0 to Arsenal. It's huge.
It is England San Marino, and he's gone on the lower end. Could be some
big changes in the table this week. There's some of the same, but there's also, if someone could pull off one of the 5-0s or the 5-2s, then you really will be giving yourself an advantage. Right then, that does us for this week's edition of Edge of the Box in association with UltimateFan. If you can subscribe to the channel with your post notifications on if you are watching via YouTube, then we would all be very grateful. And give the video a like as well, and a comment if you agree with our score predictions and everything else that we've covered in what was basically an assassination of Manchester United and Ten Hag. Also, also, if you're listening via audio, then do all the good stuff that helps the channel on there as well. And I thank you very much in advance, because I know if you've listened to it or watched it that you'll do all the things that I've just said. We will, of course, be back next week previewing the games, as we always do. So all that's left to say is enjoy all the football at the weekend and tell all your friends and family about the show.